Welcome to this first episode of More, The Life of an Artifact. These little shows are kind of based on a film we just finished called The Life of an Artifact, which follows the discovery of a small bottle during one of our surveys and follows it through research, analysis, and curation. So what we plan to do with these episodes is each one of us here at the SRARP will discuss a particular artifact that we find of interest, kind of learn about the artifact that some of the artifacts we have here at the SRARP office. A little bit about our office, the Savannah River Archaeological Research Program. We are a division of the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology, which is a department of the University of South Carolina. We are located on the Savannah River site. The Savannah River site is in the most western portion of South Carolina. It is a DOE, Department of Energy, managed facility. It straddles Aiken, Barnwell, and Allendale counties, 300 square miles, 210,000 acres. And what the SRARP does is manages the cultural resources here on site. The Savannah River site was first announced on November 28, 1950. The Atomic Energy Commission decided after a lengthy process to build the site here. And in the 1960s, it became mandatory that cultural resources were protected on these installations. So that is why we're here. We actually have a threefold mission for the Department of Energy. Number one, again, is compliance, the protection of the nearly 13,000 years worth of history here on site. Number two is research. Each one of us here at the office has a research agenda that tends to dovetail with the cultural resources here on site. And finally, public education and outreach. So a little film like this tends to kind of cover all of that. We'll be discussing some of the research we do, and of course some of the artifacts we find here obviously are for the compliance aspect. And then finally, public education. Dissemination of information is what we're trying to do, especially at this time where due to the COVID-19 we can't go out into the public. So hopefully these films will be able to fulfill that duty of the dissemination of information. So what artifact am I going to talk about today? Well, this is the first episode. I thought I would be kind of the guinea pig for this for the rest of the office. Anyone who knows me probably knows exactly which artifact I'm going to bring out. And of course, I'm going to bring out the Dave jar, which was discovered in 2006 here on the Savannah River site by our field crew of Jeff Hughes, Scott Stanley, and Chris Thornock. It was discovered during one of our compliance-related activities. They were doing some survey, ended up doing some work on a tenant farm. And this was actually found in the trash midden of the tenant farm. How long was it there? The artifacts associated with it, they go from about 1920 up to the 1950s. So it could have been in the ground any period of time during that length of time. Once it was finally excavated, it was 19 pieces. Is what was finally discovered. Those 19 pieces were pieced back together with a type of glue that we can actually soak this in hot water, and it will melt apart, not leaving any residue on each sherd. So if we wanted to do further analysis, that residue would not impede that further research. Total weight is about 18 pounds. It's a heavy jar, about 18 pounds, and I towed it around quite a bit. A couple of things you'll notice. First of all, the top is missing. Was this on purpose, by accident? We're not sure, but it does look like they tried to smooth the top down. This top is very smooth. A lot of the potters we talked to said that more than likely this had been used as maybe a whetstone. That is maybe in the kitchen or in the barn, used to sharpen the knives. So that's why it tends to have this. Tends to have like this smooth feel when you rub your hands across it. We never found the handle. The handle has very sharp edges. So more than likely the handle snapped off. We don't know exactly why this jar broke, but we tend to think maybe the handle snapped off while they were toting it and the jar broke and shattered to the ground. How was this jar used? Well, we know there are no striker marks at the bottom of it, i.e. as a butter churn. So the striker, as they would have been making the butter, would have left an indentation at the bottom. There's nothing like that is there. So we believe this was probably used as a sauerkraut jar. When you look inside the jar, you'll notice that most of the glaze has been kind of eaten away about 2/3 of the way up. So sauerkraut being very acidic, that's probably what happened to this jar on the interior. Why was it here? Where it was located is approximately 35 to 40 miles south of Edgefield. Now, the jar is dated 1862, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. Why was it here? Well, you know, in this area, there were several large plantations. You have Red Cliff Plantation in Jackson, the Bush Plantation here on site, Ashley Plantation. So they would have needed large amounts of wares for the populations on each of those plantations. You know, the families that lived there, as well as the slaves. So, you know, in the mid-19th century, these types of jars would have been used for the storage, for making butter, for storing meat, grain, carrying water. So this was like the Tupperware of the mid-19th century. So that's probably why it ended up here. Who made this jar? Well, what we know is his name is on the front of it, Dave. What we know about Dave is he was born about 1801 in Edgefield District. What makes Dave special is that he knew how to read and write. And actually on the front of this jar, he has the letters LM and the date April 16th, 1862. And of course, he wrote his name. On some of his wares, he actually wrote a poem. He would write things like, "Oh, moon and stars, it's hard work to make big jars." Or he would write things like, "Blow the fife and beat the drum. The 4th of July has surely come." Most of the jars that we know of that Dave has signed and dated and left these inscriptions on are in museums or private collections. This is the only one that was ever found in an archaeological context. So we're kind of proud of this little jar, and it's actually become a bit of a celebrity. Since 2011, we've taken it on numerous outreach venues, talking to schools and civic groups. And in 2013, the SRARP worked closely with Mr. Mark Alberton of Scrapbook Video Productions to do a documentary on Dave called Discovering Dave, Spirit Captured in Clay. And at the end of this video, there will be those links to get you to that film if you've not seen it. So that's a little bit about the Savannah River Archaeological Research Program, where we're at, why we're here on site, what we do. And of course, the artifact I decided to pick is the Dave jar. Thank you for watching this episode, and we'll have more coming up. We got some prehistoric artifacts to talk about. We have some other historic artifacts, and we may be visiting some of the cultural resources still left on this 300 square miles. So again, thank you, and I hope to see you on the next episode.